Hi everyone, my name is Sarishka Desai and I'm a fourth year medical student at the University of Connecticut. Today I'd like to talk to you about a really great experience I've had working in a virtual or a remote lab where I'm located hundreds of miles away from my mentor, Dr. Zeberdost. Hopefully through this presentation you can learn what it's like to be a student working remotely from their mentor, as well as how to get involved if that's something you're interested in. First, I'd like to acknowledge that getting involved in research at any level, middle school, high school, college, even beyond college, is hard for a number of reasons, and I'd like to commend you for being interested and excited about science. It's something I've found personally very rewarding, and hopefully I can provide you with a couple pointers for getting involved with research. The first question I'd like you to ask yourself is, what are you specifically interested in, and what are you passionate about? There are a lot of great opportunities and there's a lot of great science out there, but it can be helpful to whittle down your area of focus before you work on pursuing those mentorships and those connections. Identify potential mentors. How I did this in high school was I looked through scientific articles, through scientific databases, which are free and online, to identify people whose research I was interested in and that I could reach out to. Once you've identified several researchers whose work is interesting to you, the next step is to reach out and ask to get involved. The great part about being in a virtual or a remote lab is that these researchers don't need to be close to your home. They don't need to be close to your school. They can be hundreds of miles away and you still can participate in what they're working on. So the way to do this is typically through an email. And here's a structure that I found really helpful when I was in high school to introduce myself to people I had never met. So the first thing you want to do is introduce yourself. This can be one sentence, shouldn't be more than that. The second thing you want to do is identify why you're contacting them. Remember, they don't know who you are, so it's important that you state specifically why you're reaching out to them. The next thing to do is actually ask them to be your mentor. And the last thing you'd want to do is set a follow-up time. So this email should be very brief, 4 to 7 sentences at the absolute maximum. So here's an example of an email I sent to one of my current mentors several years ago, and I had actually never met him prior to sending this email. So I started with my intro. Hi, Dr. So-and-so. My name is Sarishka Desai, and I'm a medical student at UConn. Short, sweet, he knows exactly who I am. A key pearl here is to include both your first and last name, especially the first time you communicate with somebody. Then I moved on to my why. I explained what topics specifically I was interested in and how that meshed with his current area of research. Then I moved on to my ask. I directly stated that I was interested in working on research with him. I noted that I had several ideas in mind, but was also happy to work on projects he currently had in process. So I personally was flexible at that time, but keep in mind your ask might be different than mine. You might have specific time constraints. You might want to specifically work on your own research projects. So keep in mind that that really depends and really can be shaped depending on what you're looking for. And then I finished with my follow-up. I wanted to meet with him in the next couple weeks for approximately 15 to 30 minutes. I also asked him to pass on the names of any of his colleagues that might have similar research that might be a good fit with my interests that maybe I hadn't come across. And I'd highly recommend you doing the same as well. I'd also like to point out that it might take several emails to establish a mentorship. I had to send, I think, 20 to 30 emails to find my mentor, so don't be discouraged if this doesn't work out on the first or second try. But now comes the fun part. Once you've established a mentor, what does a day in the life of a virtual student scientist look like? Well, a day might look different from day to day or month to month depending on your schedule. I think what's important is to be in constant communication with your mentor. So for me, this looked like weekly or bi-weekly meetings with my mentor where I was able to troubleshoot any problems I was having, ask any questions that I might have, as well as establish to-do list items before our next meeting. I was also in constant communication with her through Slack, which is a messaging tool seen on the right, which is what we use to just message each other back and forth, although I know some students use email as well. I also participated in monthly lab meetings with the rest of the students and the graduate students involved in my PI's lab. This again depends from student to student. It might not be possible with your schedule, but I found it really interesting to meet other students involved in research as well. So I went when I could. I also did a lot of data analysis and manuscript preparation, which is the writing of the manuscript, on my own time. So I really had to be organized with my own schedule, and I think that's key for anybody wanting to do virtual research, is that you're kind of on your own schedule. So making sure to have that planned out in some way, shape, or form that works for you was key for me. All right, so this is an example of a data set I used to conduct my research. The cool part about this is that it was completely free through cms.gov. So I was able to access this data and download this data completely free and do the analysis on my computer through a computer program called RStudio, which I would encourage you to look into if research like this is something you're interested in. And this is an example of what the analysis output looked like. So on the left, we have some maps, and on the right, we have a simple line graph. And I conducted both of these analyses in RStudio, as I mentioned prior, as well as actually created these images in RStudio. This might be very intimidating, but I actually had very, very limited computer science knowledge before this project. So if data analysis is something you're interested in, I would highly recommend taking computer science classes. And the code online for the maps was completely free as well. I literally just used Google. So this is something that if you're interested in, you definitely have the tools to do if you have a computer at home. So some action items if you're really interested in virtual research and this sounds like the thing for you. As I mentioned prior, computer science classes can be helpful as a lot of virtual research isn't in the bench, in the lab, but it's on your computer. The second thing I'd recommend is reach out to mentors using the structure we talked about prior, and just really staying interested is key. I think the students I see that are the most motivated, they'll always find something. It might not be your first shot, your second shot, but you will find research, and I'm sure you'll be a great researcher. So keep up that spark and that interest in research.